I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. On Thursdays, we have the pleasure of connecting with some of the best minds in the country, leaders in the legal profession. My friend Kamal J. King is joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, and will be joined shortly by Minneapolis attorney Clinton Collins. He's corporate counsel for the Geico Corporation. Kamal King, former retired corporate counsel for Coca-Cola based in Atlanta. Today's program also includes a colleague and a friend, and you'll be pleased to know this, Kamal. My friend, our friend, Dr. Vincent Peter Hayden. He's a native of Kansas City. And so he grew up blocks from where you and I grew up, Kamal King. Dr. Hayden, Kamal, and I were in the same classes together from third grade all the way through, I think, D.A. Holmes kindergarten, Central Junior High. Then he stayed at Central. I went to Westport High, but we go back a long, long ways, and we have a great fun. Who's also here is Brenda Lyle Gray.
Don't you want to know what school I went to?
Well, yeah. What school did you go to, Dr. Hayden?
Went to Wendell Phillips, Lincoln Jr., and De La Salle.
So we won't hold any of that against you. We understand. And who else is on the screen is Brenda Lyle Gray. Now, Brenda and I were in the class in the kindergarten together. I think Brenda, Bernal, and Bernard, probably all of us together at Mrs. Webster's class down on, must have been 23rd or 22nd and Prospect. That's when the year they had a fire at D.A. Holmes when we were supposed to start there. But the school had to be shifted to Booker T. Washington, and the kindergarten couldn't fit in that school. We had class in a dance hall, I believe, across the street from the Green Duck Tavern upstairs. Wow. And so that's how we started. Wow. So Brenda goes back along. So Brenda's on board as a writer and documents and writes stories about these interviews. And again, this is really great. Who's usually here, who's not here today, is my first cousin, Burnell Powell, Dean Burnell Venable Powell, former Dean of the Law School at University of South Carolina, former Dean of the Law School at University of Missouri at Kansas City. And I grew up in his house on the corner of 28th and Brooklyn is where our family, his dad was the patriarch of the family. So a lot of connections to Kansas City here. And thank you all for being here. What I wanted to do is cover several things over the course of the conversation. I'm going to be joined by Clinton Collins momentarily, but thanks to those who are watching this on YouTube. If you connecting via YouTube, subscribe to the channel, share it with people. We're a small audience now, but we're growing it. We show up every day to make this happen. And we use the YouTube to connect to our social media pages. So we're connecting to audiences via Facebook here locally and regionally in our McFarlane Media Network. But we also have the great fortune of recent being connected to the Black Press of America through the Facebook page of Black Press USA. So we really are covering some territory, trying to build a connection around important, timely conversations that we think are both wonderful and necessary. Kamal King, I wanted to first ask you to, what's on your mind? How you doing, first of all? And what things come first to mind to you to talk about today? And we're open-ended on this conversation.
Okay, well, hello, and again, thank you for the invitation. And I have to say hello to Brenda. Haven't seen her in a while. I think since our 50th reunion, maybe, at Central High School. So it's good seeing you, Brenda. Yeah, you're on mute, so unmute yourself. Yeah. What's been on my mind here lately that I've been discussing with my wife and with a couple of friends is the killings that are going on. Here in Atlanta, I mean, it's like 5 people were killed this past weekend. And, Chicago is just an ongoing story. And, I'm beginning to ask the question, why do Blacks kill Blacks? I used to point to it's too many guns, but, white folks got guns too, but they're not killing each other the way we're killing each other. So that's basically what's been on my mind. And I have no answers, but that's a question that has been bothering me.
Well, it's top of mind for everybody in the country, and it's certainly top of mind for us here in Minnesota right now in particular. In fact, it might not happen, but we may be being joined momentarily by a brother named KG Wilson. I just talked to him 2 minutes before we got on, and I invited him to join the call. He might or might not have the technology to do it. He might be moving. So if he does come on, here's the story. A couple of days ago, yesterday, they announced that his 6-year-old granddaughter died. She died of a gunshot wound in the back of her head. She was riding in a car with her mom, his daughter, and they were coming home from in the neighborhood where I live and where Dr. Hayden's offices are. He owns a couple of businesses in the community that are in social services, and they were heading home. They had stopped at McDonald's and apparently stopped on the way home and walked into the middle of a shootout, or drove in a shootout. And the consequence was this child was hit in the head. She was driven by the mom to a nearby hospital, trauma center, and was in a coma, stayed in the coma, everybody praying and hoping. And then yesterday, the announcement was that she died. And so this community is torn apart, and the country should be torn apart as well. This child is one of 3 in the past 2 weeks. The same day or the day before, another 8-year-old child was shot at a birthday party while she was on a trampoline. Shot in the head, I believe, hospitalized in that same hospital now in critical condition. This child is sharing a room, or either in the next room, to another child who's 10 years old, who was also shot on the last day of April. And so this is trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And the question is the same question you've raised, Kamal King. What do we do? Where do we go? Why and how can we talk about this? Dr. Hayden, jump in if you would, because you work with trauma and our mental health as a community. But share, if you would, kind of the story so that Kamal and Brenda kind of know what's going on here in our community.
Sure. Thank you so much, Al. I appreciate it. And my brothers and my sister, I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of this conversation. Look, my daughter, Kamal, was killed 6 years ago, come July the 23rd in Atlanta on a girls' weekend. This baby, we have raised her, and she went to Prairie View A&M. She graduated. She was in a enterprise senior executive course, 25 years old. She and a couple of girls just gonna go to Atlanta. They were in Buckhead, man. You may have recalled this if you were there, in Buckhead. Now, Buckhead is not the bucket of blood, Brenda. It's where you go and you shouldn't have an issue. She goes out to look for, it's a club that shouldn't have been open, first of all. She goes out just to make sure the Uber is coming because she's trying to do the right thing, not driving, drinking, and things of this nature. Some gang members, bucks or whatever the case is, start shooting at each other, trying to rob somebody. The guy runs past her, uses her as a shield, and she gets 2 bullets, dead instantly. You know what I'm saying? So when we're talking about why are we doing what we're doing? Her parents, just like all of y'all, I'm quite sure, we sent all our girls. One graduated from Mizzou last year. One graduated from Mississippi State. The other one from Prairie View. I got another son that's was a state senator. Now, what else can I do as a black man when they say we're not doing enough? And then who kills her? Not a white man, not a policeman, but somebody who looks like her. And I said at her homegoing, this man who we never found out who he was, but this young kid may have been her husband at some point in time. But no, he's around here selling dope, robbing people, etc. So I don't understand the killing either, but I can tell you it's a mental health issue. And we can go back to post-traumatic stress disorder, but that has nothing to do with someone killing three or shooting three babies, and one of them has passed away already. So I'm not sure. And it's time to stop. And I'm from Kansas City. I was born and raised on 23rd and Vine. I grew up with Toad, if y'all know who artist Gunnar is.
Of course.
You understand?
And seldom seen.
Right. And then my past chair was Harold Mazzell, who's one of your graduates from Central.
Right.
And I can name them all, Winston Dillard, all of them that y'all went to school with, because the time it broke, we were all down on Purcell and West Purcell and Forest. And by the way, if you go home now, you will cry if you see the houses and who's moved in to Forest and Tracy and things of this nature. But I'm sorry, I got a little way out.
You're buying
But
it
my
all
point is the stress disorders, yeah, there's a lot of stress going on, but it's almost my background is in psychology, and the thing is, what you'll note is many kids that was abused by their parents end up abusing their children, end up abusing, because that's what happens. As we find a way, if we can't take it out on the man, we take it out on ourselves. And that's what we're trying to deal with at Turning Point, trying to deal with this mental health, the chemical health piece, the housing, because we can always blame it on the man. But now, Kamal, when we going to turn the script and blame it on ourselves?
Take a minute, if you would, Peter Hayden and Dr. Hayden, and talk about the work that you've done. You've done innovative work. The place of the work is here, but the impact is national. And
Yes.
You've created new thinking and culturally specific orientation or delivery of services in the mental health field. So if you would share with Brenda and Kamal and our listening audiences the vision, the mission of Turning Point.
Turning Point started because of my addiction. At the time I went through treatment, there were no Afrocentric treatment programs, only the Hazeltons and other programs. And so back then we were most likely to go to prison or to jail and things of this nature. I went to treatment. It was with a young man named Henry Sullivan. And Henry asked the question, how can we get a program that was Afrocentric that would work in our community? And that's what I did. I went to the leadership. I went to the leadership of our community and said, you need to help me. Yeah, if I can do it, many other people can do it. And so Turning Point has treated over 40,000 men and women in chemical health, mental health, housing, because of, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the shoulder because it's the shoulders I stand on that I'm patting, but because of that, I had the opportunity. I had asked Al McFarlane, could you help me? Can you give me support? I don't know how to talk about this when it comes to the newspaper and things of this nature. And with his help, it came to fruition only because even Black people didn't want my program in their backyard. And my whole piece was, it should be in our backyard because that's where the culture is. That's where the foundation, that's where the village is. And if we're going to get treated and we're going to change, it'll have to be within our village. And so fortunately, I had Al Insight and some other people that I could name, but they were people like Mr. Banks and like what was the other guy's name? Well, anyway, I was trying to think of some people in the schools that we went to. So I started it, and I got $25,000. Come June the 1st, I got $45,000, and in 45 years, we're a company of maybe $7-8 million. Not enough, because I still have to fight the European, because it's like, whose ice is colder? You remember that, Brenda? Whose ice is colder? Well, the white man's ice is colder. You could get it from the ice house, the same ice, and you could open in your store, and people go to the store across the street because their ice was colder. And so that's what I'm still fighting up here. Many African Americans are still being sent, not that they want to go, but they're being sent to other white programs because the people who send them there are white. And so I have to fight that all the time. I have to get Al in his newspaper and do those kinds of things. But what the short is that the one thing I found out, and that's why I'm so glad I'm from Kansas City, and I always will let people know, is that we learn. Remember Babyface Pool Hall? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. See, that's my mentors to a certain extent. The Babyface, the Lawrence A. Joneses, who started his piece down on Vine Street, the Consolidated Cab Company,
Leon Jordan's.
That's right, Leon Jordan,
Yeah,
and the Watkins brothers. Even though they was making money, Leon and Watkins brothers got together. And we are what we are because of them. And so I've carried that strategy up here, and that's how I started Turning Point. And Turning Point, 90% of Turning Point feeds children because their parents work for us. 90% of the people that work for Turning Point, I mean 100%, but 90% of those people look like me, are paying taxes. They're buying cars, they're buying homes, all those kinds of things. So it's not just who I treat, but we're treating all the people that we serve because of this company that God has given me to be able to share with you and others. Even though every day, come 23rd of July, I got to think about this beautiful girl named Taylor Hayden. But I got other girls, and so I can't just. I went to Bethel AME Church. You might went to Purcell or Metropolitan or whatever the case is. But those people,
sounds familiar.
Yeah. So those people who did everything for me, I saw them every Sunday in church. I knew they had my best at hand, and that's what I'm trying to do up here. That's what Al McFarlane's trying to do up here, and I'm quite sure that both of you are doing the same thing wherever you are.
But Dr. Hayden, one of the things that I think about with you, am I muted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
The art of loving oneself. And I keep, every time I look at my plaque or my frame that says, I'm not afraid to try the art of loving oneself, we loved ourselves. We knew we were sharp. This one up here in the corner, I mean, you couldn't tell him he wasn't tough with the law. Or Burnell. And of course, I just wrote about Bernard and his statue in Brooklyn Park. And I was writing and I was crying all the way through it because that was our heart. We just said he could have, Burnell and I talked about it. He could have gone to the Senate or been in Jefferson City. He was that tough and that fearless. But there were a lot of us. And I just think about these 3 babies that didn't get a chance.
Yes.
And I was writing, Al Flowers was, Al was interviewing Al Flowers and AJ yesterday. So I'm looking at the pain in my boss's face, and I'm looking at the pain in Al Flowers' face because he lost a daughter who was murdered.
That's right.
And, you know, I woke up this morning and I said, God, when does it stop? Our babies need a chance, but then what's going to happen when they get in the classroom? They're going to have to fight there because they're so far behind. Farmer educator, so that's where I'm coming from. But Dr. Hayden, I look at that every day and I think about how you emphasize that we have to love us.
That's right. That's right. And thank you so much. And I was just thinking, did y'all go to school with Carl Green?
Carl, I know Carl Green. He's
Was
now
that on Lockridge, Kamal? Did he live on Lockridge?
Carl was older than you and I, Brenda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think he went to he went to Central, but he was old. He was in classes before us, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we came out in the 60s.
Him and Billy Creighton and those guys.
I don't remember
a little
them.
older.
Yeah.
Brenda, I was thinking as you were talking, the last time we had Peter on the program, I think you and I were both on, and we both at a later date talked about something he said that was profound, I think, prophetic. And you raised the question, and I can't say it the way you said it, but I'm going to trigger your memory, Peter Hayden, about what is it in Black people that makes white people so afraid? You know, what is it about Black people loving themselves? That's what you said.
Yeah.
That makes white people so afraid, which creates this massive resistance to our humanity, our development, our possibility, and which enables them to stay stacked against us. So I want you to say what you told us then, if you would, Peter, but also pivot and say, what is it in that same thing in us that also cripples us? Right? What's the Black side of that same analysis? So go ahead.
Yeah, I think the hey, Clinton, I think
how you doing?
I know for a fact that the inferiority is because they have nothing that's superior. So let me just say again, the inferiority of white folk is because they have nothing superior. So they took this country. Everywhere they've gone, they've taken things because they didn't have it within themselves. Okay? So for example, what I used is I used on one hand, Black people got big lips. So what they do? They taunted us. They made fun of us. But what do they do in secret? They go and get some type of surgery to get big lips. The same thing. White folks didn't have big booties. So they try to make everybody that was a model not have big booties. They were slim and skinny and things of this nature. But yet and still, what are they doing now? What's the Kardashians, all them doing? They getting fat, putting a booty. And I don't mean any harm, but I'm just telling you the reality. So how can I live in a world by which I have all the traits that you want, but you then diss me for having it and go around the corner and get it? And so I'm a simple kind of guy. But and so then how do I survive? Well, I survive by not being inferior to anything that one tells me I don't have. You say I can't, then I'm gonna make sure I can. That's what I do, and that's what I teach my people, because when they come through treatment, they're whipped down, and they're whipped down mentally because they've heard you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't. So yesterday we were out of, or 2 days ago, Turning Point didn't work. You know why? Because it was Malcolm X's birthday. Parks' birthday's coming, and don't call me because I'm on vacation. Before they did Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X are our vacations. And so what we do is we work on Columbus Day and President's Day and things of this nature. So anything I can do or we can do to make people come to Turning Point. For example, you go through Turning Point, nothing but Black, beautiful pictures. So my clients know, and those people coming in know, that we have pride. And that pride was brought to me by going to Wendell Phillips, going to Booker T. Washington, going to CRISPR Addicts, going to Banneker. When I went to school, all schools I went to were named after Black people. It's only when I came up here. Go right ahead, sir.
Go ahead, come on.
Yeah, you brought back a lot of memories, and let me say that when I went to college at Central Missouri State, I was 18 years old, and after going to Central High School, I didn't believe that white people could beat Black people doing anything.
That's right.
Sports-wise, academics-wise, nothing, because we had a microcosm in our neighborhood of people that you've named, Black businessmen and Black businesswomen who were intent on taking over and controlling our neighborhood. And that's why Freedom Incorporated came about. You know, the Italians used to run the black politics in our neighborhood. But then the Holidays, Attorney Holiday, Leon Jordan, Babyface, the people that you know, got together and took over the politics of the neighborhood. So it's one thing, though, I think that being segregated helped us have good self-images of ourselves. Being in a segregated situation helped us have good self-images of ourselves. And then when we went to Central High School, you had all of these Black athletes. The competition we had was with Lincoln and Manual, the other Black schools.
And Sumner.
Yeah, and Sumner owned us all. But the competition was there. And it's interesting for you to talk about why they hate us. You didn't use the most obvious is, you know, our dark skins, the melanin, and then they go out and try to get tans. They try to darken themselves up. And I went to Howard University, and there was a lady at Howard University who I'm sure you know by the name of Frances Cress Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Frances Cress Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote a book called The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation. Yeah. And what her thesis is that the reason that they hate us is because they cannot produce melanin. They cannot produce melanin, what we had. And I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna stop there. But those are just some thoughts that came to my mind.
We'll come back around to it. We're joined by Attorney Clinton Collins Jr., Clinton Collins, and Dr. Hayden and I all served on the board of the Minneapolis Urban League. Now it's the Urban League of Twin Cities. Clinton, and thank you for joining. Had you locked out in the back room for a minute, but I'm glad you're here now. and just jump in. We're having a free floating conversation. One of the things that you and I talked about before was addressing this issue of gun violence and bad actors in our community. In fact, that's what Kamau opened up with, is concerned about how we are killing ourselves and being impacted by all of the gun violence that we're experiencing right now. So we lost your picture for a second there, but if you are able to, go ahead and give your thoughts and your impressions, and we'll go from there.
Well, as you and I were talking earlier, I strongly believe that there are those of us in our community who know who's doing this stuff. And for a variety of historical reasons, and just plain fear of retaliation, let's be honest, that we're not calling these guys out. And I think that ultimately, the way this problem is going to be dealt with is that we as a community have to be willing to call out bad behavior publicly. And that means being willing to go to the police when you witness a crime, get rid of this whole snitches get stitches mentality, and be willing to testify in court. That's the bottom line. And because without the testimony of people who can identify these guys, it's hard to prosecute them. And as long as they feel, and I think with some justification, that they are unlikely to be prosecuted, a lot of them are going to continue to do bad stuff. Now, of course, for historical reasons, there are a lot of historical reasons why we're so plagued with crime in our community. But one thing that's always struck me, having come from parents who lived in the South, was that we've always lived in stressful times as Black Americans. My parents grew up in Mississippi in the 20s and the 30s, where people were openly lynched regularly. You had laws legalizing segregation and all kinds of oppression, and you never knew from one day to the next if some white person wasn't going to attack you or name call you or whatever, even worse. But as a community, and I think this goes to what's been said earlier, not only were there the positive role models, there was accountability. That, for example, we went to the same churches. Church was a big part of our existence. And I know when I was growing up, I grew up in Denver, but I was raised by Southerners, and most of the people in the church I grew up were Southerners. If anybody saw you acting up, they would get you, and then your parents would get you. That there was a community that held people accountable for their bad stuff. And you knew, at least I knew when I was in church, if I was cutting up with my sister, if anybody in that church saw me, it was getting back to my parents. And, and when I got home, it was not going to be a pretty picture. And in our community, to a great extent, and I agree with what's been said earlier about segregation, one thing segregation did do that was positive was that you had all strata of Black people together. You had the Black professionals, the Black business people, the jive talkers. We all lived in the same community. And there was, because of that, the more prosperous, this might sound elitist, but the more prosperous, educated people not only served as role models, they were willing to call people out because they knew that the bad behavior reflected on everybody. And now a lot of people who have the means, Black people, have moved out of the hood. I mean, I've made a conscious decision to stay in North Minneapolis, and I can tell you when I moved up here in the early 2000s, people were absolutely shocked. Why in the hell would you want to go to North Minneapolis? And part of it was financial because I had just remarried and I was able to get more house with the money. But I always believed that ultimately the Black middle class has a duty to stay connected in some ways to the community. And that by moving out, you not only take your resources, you take your presence out. And like in my neighborhood, the kids know me. They know I'm going to call them out if I see bad behavior. They know what I do for a living. They've asked me questions about it. And having those positive role models right there which is why it's kind of a segue. It's important to have the police live in the community as well, is crucial. And again, we've lost that. But I think the first step is for people in our community to step up and be willing to publicly identify and testify if necessary.
Clinton's going in and out. Go ahead, Kamal.
Yeah. I live in a majority Black community. I moved where I live now 22 years ago. We built a house because we found some land and has a lake and all that. And it was the white people here were older. The older white people here, they stayed. But my neighborhood, my wife used to go to a doctor up north in the northern part of Atlanta, and when I would take her up there, they had sidewalks, they had all the restaurants, all the services that you need, and I thought about moving to that part of town. I didn't, because my children were born here and they love Decatur. They think Decatur's the end of the world. All right. Even though it doesn't have all the services that I know exist. But what I'm really glad I didn't, the reason I'm really glad I didn't, and what changed my mind, was when the vote came in that presidential night. I guess it was November 8th. In DeKalb County, the county that I live in, the Black county, put Biden in the White House, and I started thinking, I'm so proud to be right where I am. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about it. There ain't no Trump signs around here, and I'm just happy to be where I am. And then again, as Clinton says, and as we've all talked about, people come to me and ask me, what do you do? They see my property, they see me out working on it, and they say, well, what do you do? And the young people, the same way I was influenced by Dr. Johnson and the holidays, when I was in school, the Black professionals, the same way I was influenced by them, by looking at them and seeing them, these kids are now being influenced by me. You can do it too. If I can do it, I know you can do it. So I'm glad to be where I am, and I no longer even want to go that way.
Let me run a couple of things by everybody here for a reaction, and then give some of my reactions in the process to this rich and wonderful conversation. I'm so glad to be having it, and I thank all of you so much for being here and being part of this. One idea is that I wrote an essay, an article a dozen years ago. You might remember this, Peter Hayden, because I delivered it as a testimony in a Senate and House hearing over at the state capitol, St. Paul. But the title of the piece was Black Crime, Black Punishment. Black Crime, Black Punishment. And the premise was this, that number one, our community is looked at, described, kept in a position of being deficient, defective, of being incapable of providing good to society, and therefore we are both encircled, corralled, held in a place where we can do the least damage to the general society, and whatever we do to ourselves, that's our problem, not theirs, right? But our being held is an enterprise. It's a business, right? And so we suffer from all kinds of physical and mental challenges, and the systems that respond to those mental and physical challenges are systems outside of our community. White folks run the clinic, run the hospital, run the this, run the that. Oh, our problem is food. Our people don't own the grocery store. White people run the grocery stores. Our problem is we want to build something. We don't have access to builders in our community. Our problem is we want education to be different. But as it turns out, they hire young white girls from the Iron Range from places like Superior, Wisconsin, or Duluth, Minnesota, and bring them in and put them in as trainees in Black schools in my neighborhood. But Black teachers are not hired, and when they're hired, they're given a rough time, and their credentials are questioned, and they decide, you know what, I don't need the headache. Somewhere somebody loves me for being who I am and what I bring, and they don't stay. So retaining Black talent has been a challenge in Minnesota. So all that to say, if we look at just the issue of crime, the crime is real, but the answer to the crime has to be commensurate and equal. And the proposition I laid out was that if our people are committing 20% of the crime in this marketplace, this community, 20% of all the resources that bring solution or response to the problem ought to be going through our people too, through Turning Point for recovery, through Insight News for information about how we create and become and exist as community, through North Point Health and Wellness, a Black clinic providing personal, family, and individual health care. That not only that 20% of all the judges involved in adjudication, of all the prosecutors ought to be Black prosecutors, of all the defense attorneys ought to be Black defense attorneys, 20% of all the caseworkers who deal with managing parolees or pretrial diversion ought to be from our community. 20% of all of the facilities that hold us incarcerated ought to be not downtown and not in the suburbs, but right here in the corner in our neighborhood. And the contracts for sodding those facilities ought to be with businesses in this community. The contracts for providing knives and spoons and forks and food every week, all of it, the entire enterprise. That is a move towards understanding what equity means, what sovereignty at one level means. It's a way that we need to begin to define ourselves in relation to both problems and solutions, and emphasize our role and our genius as solution makers. We can provide. The problem is, it's just what you said, Kamal. We bring all these gifts, they look at it, they poo-poo it, they deny it, and they turn around and they do it. And they keep us in the problem category and keep making money, both imitating and suppressing our capacity to breathe. So where we are now, from my point of view, is to recognize that level of the game and use any political organizing incidents, even like the unrest that occurred after George Floyd's murder last year. We need to use everything at our disposal to demand and to negotiate parity and equity. And we have to assure everybody that if you want to be living the life you want to live, we want you to live it, but we want to live it too. And you can't take our share of the resources, our contribution, to fatten your lifestyle and deny us from an opportunity to live bountifully as well. What do you think about that, guys?
Sound like Malcolm.
Oh, really?
I mean, you know, that was his whole
message.
Yeah, that was his message.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that we should be controlling the stores and things in our community. Easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done. The idea, I think, is a valid idea. You know, your dad immigrated, opened up a store. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a store that served our community. So it can be done. But we have to recognize though that there are internal forces within the Black community that got off the ships in 1619 that found a way to benefit from the way things were. I think that I've given you the example of the movie Django.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The movie Django, and the role that Samuel L. Jackson played, Stephen.
Yeah.
You know, he was the one who could drink with the master and was over, you know, he was up with the master. There are those kind of forces that are benefiting people who look like us, mm-hmm. who are benefiting from the way things are. Mm-hmm. And whether they be politicians, we have to seek them out and find them out and expose them the same way we exposed Trump. There was another point I wanted to make with regard to what Clinton said. I believe also that there's a few people who are doing these killings,
Mhm.
and they're not being held. And then when they are held, they get out pretty quick because they're serving a purpose. But like Clinton said, we need to expose them too,
Mhm.
and just kind of try to take it over. Just kind of take it over. Easier said than done. We need leaders, though, leaders with the kahunas to call on it, to call it out,
To
Clinton,
call
what do
the
you?
Tim Scotts out.
to call it out. Jerry Rawlings, the ex-president of Ghana, Jerry Rawlings.
Right.
You know, he pulled a coup in Ghana
Mhm.
because he didn't like the way the politics was going, and he gave the country back. He was a military man. He gave the politicians back the country. He didn't want to be a politician, and they went back to doing the same thing. So he pulled the second coup. And because they had tried to kill him on the second, before he pulled the second coup, I mean, literally pulled his nails out, pulled his fingernails out. And when he got out, he lined these guys up on Labadi Beach in Accra, Ghana, and mowed them down. In Ghana, you can walk down the streets of Accra and you don't have no problem.
No,
You don't
no.
have any, the crime is very low because you have somebody who was in control, who was not taking the nonsense. And it's the same way in China. They know that this guy in China is nonsensical. Mao Zedong was the same way. You had to stop your drugs. He put you in a rehabilitation camp one time, and if you went back to it, he just mowed you down.
Yeah.
That's draconian, I think is the right word for that. But the question is, what is the interpretation, or how do you interpolate that strategy to fit today's context? What does it mean for today? Clinton, what you think? Brenda, what you think? Peter Hayden, what do you think?
Well, I
Clinton.
think, I don't think we need to executing people. I don't know if I want to go that far, but I mean, that's kind of the ultimate solution, but I understand the sentiment, and I think that we need to, at a minimum, publicly identify and shame these people. That there is this tendency, and I understand historically why that exists. Uh, I know I saw it when I was a prosecutor. Briefly, I had a few prosecutor stints early in my career, and no matter how bad somebody was, when it came time to sentence them, you usually didn't see the dad. You often wouldn't see brothers and sisters, but you would see the mother. And she would be there saying, "Oh, my baby, please don't lock him up." And, would basically appeal to the emotion of the court, saying he's had a rough time, and, black men have been historically mistreated, all of which is probably true. But I think it really does come down to, again, maybe not quite executing people, but a real tough love. I mean, one thing I asked my wife earlier today, I said, would you be willing to turn someone in if you knew for a certainty that they were responsible for one of these murders of these young kids? And she said, well, I'd like to be able to, but, what about the safety of my family? Which is a valid concern. But as a community, if we make it real clear that we're going to protect people who come forward, and that we're going to value protecting our community over avoiding snitching or being perceived as a tool of the man. I mean, it really is going to take a kind of a cultural reset, because right now there are some people who, I call them apologists, who will say, Yeah, we have some bad people, but here's why, and they make excuses for bad behavior. As a community, we got to stop that. And we
Stop
got
it.
to be willing to say, this is bad. Even though you've had a hard time, black people have had a hard time. We've had a hard
Mhm.
time since the moment we landed in this country. But in terms of killing each other, it's never been as bad as it is right now. It's just bad. It is bad. It is not
It's
acceptable.
horrible. It's
And we
horrible.
have to be willing. Yeah,
Brenda,
You can go to the elementary schools. You can go to the elementary schools, and those mamas that he was talking about that's pleading with the judge.
I mean,
You know,
I spent many years in the military, and at the Air Force, all the service academies, they have the same slogan. We will not lie, steal, or cheat, or tolerate those that do. And too often in our community, we tolerate bad behavior with excuses for it. And again, there are some valid historical reasons. I mean, you can point to a lot of reasons why we are where we are. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that murdering someone else is bad. Stealing someone else's property is bad. Vandalizing buildings is bad. And even if you've had a hard life or a hard time individually or collectively, it doesn't alter the fact that it is antisocial bad behavior. And we got to be willing to stand up and say that.
I agree. I agree.
so let me throw something in again. Just the thought comes up in my mind when Castro was about to launch the revolution in Cuba. He went to the part of the country where he came from and where his family lived and prospered. His dad was a big rancher, and his mission was change, revolution, right? And that meant upsetting the existing ruling class and the moneyed property people. And his men knew that this was where his father's farm was. They said, "Well, what about the Castro, plantation?" He said, burn it first. So the question is, how do we position our pursuit of freedom and accountability? Is it enough to say we want to arrest and block and stop, but not deal with the structure that houses and cultivates and manages and supports predictable uh, poverty, impoverishment, and self-destructive behavior by simply turning them in or arresting them? Or is our mission bigger? Maybe it's not either or, maybe it's both and. Maybe you got to do that for the sake of keeping people alive, but do you have an obligation as well to put permanent, practical, and belief-driven energy in removing that process, that structure that creates and holds us together? What do you think, Brenda and Dr. Hayden?
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
I'm listening to all of the conversation, and Kamal, you can probably identify with the Alex Clydes of Georgia that talked about there was no insurrection and all of this, and I'm saying if we're not careful, not only will our community suffer, even with all of the money that Biden is putting in to the inner city, to education or whatever, if we don't get our people prepared to have all of their paperwork together, to be able to vote. Right now, they're fighting the midterms. Biden's only been in office 6 months. So we've got 2 layers. We've got to deal with the pain and the frustration and the neglect in our own communities, because Kansas City is going crazy too.
Yes.
And if we don't get the White House support that they need, and it's going to have to be the Stacey Abrams, toughness and determination to protect our children. That was the last line. We have a series that Al does on Friday with Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya on calling the healing circle. And if we don't start healing our children, there's going to be another generation of what we're experiencing now. And I'm really concerned about that. These people are bold. They're trying to stop the commission on January 6th now. Why? Because the truth is coming out. We've unearthed all of that, but we're also unearthing the ugliness that they put into our communities. A lot of people are convinced in Minneapolis that they're outsiders that are doing this, that there are outsiders that are bringing in the guns. Where are these kids 8 and 9 years old getting guns? So I really am concerned. And sometimes it's kind of hard to write about it because I'm saying, I'm speaking to the air. Is anyone listening? Our babies are dying.
Dr. Hayden, jump in.
Yeah, real quick. Anytime I'm around some people from Kansas City, I just have to bring up a few things. But I was a child. My mom was 15 years old when she had me in 1943. And I've been able to have kids graduating from college, become legislators and things of this nature. Where did that come from? It came from the village. You see, Brother Kamal, when you hit Ghana, I was there at the same time, and I think Al was too. But what happened is that someone got caught stealing or whatever the case was. The whole family had to go to court. The whole family, because when you make yourself look bad, you make your family look bad, and we got to deal with it. That goes back to Clinton. You're talking about folk knew what was happening by the time you got home. That's how we were raised. Now, where did we lose that? I have some ideas about how we lost it, because my children didn't grow up that way. You understand? What we did is we turned over our responsibility to the government. For example, if I give my child a spanking right now, she or he can call the police. The police will come and put me in jail. But that was on the voters' registration when they passed that law. But where were we? We were out, having a good time. There's a guy out of Minnesota named Dr. White. He just passed away maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Wrote a book about loving thyself as a Black person. In California, they took him to court because they said he was racist. He won. He won, but he said, "How is it you're going to put me in jail for loving myself?" And that's the bottom line. We've got to, whether it's the young folk or whatever the case is, there is a culture. And that culture says you can kill people who look like you. You can wear your pants on your booty or whatever the case is. That's where we got to come in. And the 5 of us talking right now has to figure out where we're not afraid to say the things we're saying now. Yeah. Because
and we're out of time. We're out of time. This has been a great conversation. Peter Hayden, thank you so much. Brenda, Lyle Gray, Kamal King in Atlanta, and we lost him for a second, Attorney Clinton Collins. But this was a rich conversation. We'll do this again. Every Thursday, I've asked my colleagues to be here and kick it. And what I love most is the potential and the pleasure I have, particularly in talking to Kamal King and to Clinton Collins and to Burnell Powell as members of the bar, as lawyers. And they have an important analysis and capacity to both describe and frame the issues and the challenges. And I think we simply need more of that. And then when you bring a Dr. Peter Hayden in and Brenda alongside me to witness and write about this, I think we're delivering something of value to our community. Listen, everybody, thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Good seeing you.
Oh, yeah. tomorrow.